Yo, what is up guys? Snap here. Today we're going to be talking about everything Trial of the Ancestors. Going to be going over all of the changes to the builds, any of the changes to our farming strategy, some learning, some happenings. There's a lot to talk about regarding the strategy, and there's a lot to talk about with the builds regarding tattoos, so let's jump right into it. Starting off with the builds, and that is going to be our carry first, is going to be the Spark Trickster build that we played. This was the first time that we played a Trickster with Spark. Overall, it fared about as expected. We knew that the Overleash from Soul Drinker combined with the Guardian nodes on the new Guardian Scion Aurabot was going to be very powerful with all the recovery rates. It feel extremely good to have the really boost ES Overleach, and kind of when the carry had his ES Overleach active, it was pretty much impossible for him to die. The only deaths we really had to the carry was just a Mega DD, or it was just so much lag he was unable to control his character. Other than that, he wasn't really dying. Tankiness fared about as expected. Trickster's a very serviceable ascendancy. Assassin's also a very serviceable ascendancy. I actually don't think there is a huge difference between them. It's just you do get a little bit of extra survival layer with Soul Drinker, of course, before you can get a disc ES gain Watcher's Eye, so there's that. As for the tattoos, we weren't able to get our hands on a Green Nightmare to get this guy suppression capped. We ended up just buying a bunch of projectile speed and duration tattoos. It's just super good for Spark. Of course, all the prod speed tattoos are super broken on Spark. It is an insane way to get prod speed. Prod speed on Spark kind of acts as like a more damage multiplier, especially for boss encounters, so definitely just wherever you can get prod speed, you should be tattooing it. And then skill effect duration for all of the other ones. We were also able to get our hands on the Necromantic Aegis Impossible Escape. Costs us like 4 divs or something like that. This wheel is still super good to pick up. Helps with your mana costs. Definitely recommend this socket still. Wasn't much else to talk about the carry here, just that tattoos are OP, get a shit ton of prod speed and skill effect duration. It does help patch up some of the weak spots of the build. Overall, performed fine. Nothing bad to say. Anyways, let's move on to the Aurabot. Now, the Aurabot also has quite a lot of interesting things here. Before the league launched, I did not plan my Aurabot to use any tattoos because I was just under the assumption that these tattoos could be very expensive. Planning your Aurabot around a new league mechanic where you don't know the prices or anything like that is usually always a mistake. However, we now know that the efficiency and the aura effect tattoos were just pretty much worthless. Like even just 1, 2, 3 chaos, or at one point you could just buy these aura effect tattoos, which is honestly kind of crazy. By the time I had actually looked into the tattoo market, I had kind of already built the Aurabot with all the stuff that I had originally planned for. I had a lot of the expensive pieces of gear, and basically the way I used tattoos was just like, I already had my build set up. I'm just going to throw tattoos to get as much aura effect and or reservation efficiency as I need to jam everything in. But I didn't plan and I didn't rework my tree to fully utilize tattoos. The Aurabots I usually play that path all the way down to Champion of the Cause. It did help having all the extra aura effect and reservation efficiency that you wouldn't normally have. It just makes the build a lot cheaper and a lot easier to put together, and this is still a completely viable way to put together your Aurabot. And it's something that will still work in the future. There is, however, something interesting to talk about, which is an Aurabot that is completely built around utilizing the full power of tattoos. So I had a thought that what if you actually put the max amount of aura effect tattoos on your tree? And instead of putting efficiency tattoos, what if you put on gear pieces that helped with your reservation, like Shavs and Prism Guardian? I POB'd this tree with a few friends, and even though you are missing aura effect on your shield and 30% on your body armor, with the tattoos, you can still hit 90 overcap this way. And fitting in all of your auras is so easy with the Prism Guardian and Shavs. You don't need to take the Pathfinder Ascendancy anymore. You can take Guardian, Necro, and Champ. And you have so much reservation efficiency left over, you don't even need the reservation efficiency over here at Sovereignty. It has all of the auras in, and it has a level 3 in Light and not even a level 4. Which is just kind of like bonkers to me that this all works out. It is using a Warrior's Tail for 100% increase effective tattoos. You get a lot of aura effect in this socket. I tried out a few other sockets like this one in Marauder/Templar and also this one at the top, but this socket's probably the best for it. Yeah, I mean, this Aurabot is 90 overcap and it honestly costs peanuts. Has a pretty good Timeless Jewel here, and it also has the Forbidden Flesh champion nodes here, but honestly, you could get away with a 2-prop Timeless Jewel here. And also, you don't strictly need champion. You could honestly go Guardian Necro to start. You don't need to spend crazy on your chest piece because you're just putting on a Shavs. You can also fix your stats with a belt. I don't have very many attributes here. I just have 23 strength roll, but because you're not using a flask anymore, you actually don't need these flask mods on your belt anymore. Not to mention, because you do have 4 cluster jewels, you can fix your attributes and your chaos res using these cluster jewels. You're also sitting at a very high ES amount of 5,700. With this particular gearing and pathing, you could probably get like an 89 overcap Aurabot off the ground at like less than 10 divines, which is actually just crazy. If tattoos go core, this is 100% the Aurabot I will be building next league. But if you guys are still in league and you're still playing, I would look to do something like this. Just the cheapness of this particular build is actually crazy to me. Not to mention, you can fit in even more auras or higher level auras within power if you just get some additional efficiency from like the sovereignty wheel here. I highly recommend this pathing. Not to mention, you still get the Marauder cheap timeless jewels here. You can choose this socket or you can choose this socket and flip-flop them. However, if you do put it in this top socket, make sure you try and get the mana mastery here. It does help your point efficiency a little bit. I'll put both of these Aurabot POBs, the one that I snapshotted, which at the end of my push, and kind of this one with tattoos that you can fully abuse the power of tattoos, so you can kind of choose which one you'd want to do. Moving on to the Cursebot. Now, there is a interesting curse effect tattoo, but it does need 7 adjacent points that you need to allocate here. And I looked at almost every single spot you can use this in, and the only one that's really point efficient is the one that's right here in the Witch. You unfortunately only take 2 of them, but you multiply it by 2 because you have Warrior's Tail, so you get a total of 32 curse effect with this pathing, and you are taking quite a lot of useful nodes. You get some AoE down here, you also get some mana, of course. You also get a little bit of chance to block spell damage. They're not nothing. You unfortunately cannot also take this one at Hexmaster because this one is actually giving you 20% less effect of your curses, so you unfortunately cannot put the tattoo here. I POB'd out a bunch of other spots, but unfortunately taking cluster jewels is actually going to be more point efficient than actually trying to jam in a bunch of these tattoos. If you can get cluster jewels with good effect, and you also can get Evil Eye for increased damage taken, I think it makes the most sense to just take the really point efficient tattoos, which was the one in here, and then fill the rest with cluster jewels. But yeah, other than that, this build works as planned. The Cursebot didn't really have any huge tattoo changes, just one addition here that made it a little bump of 32 curse effect. Not much else to talk about with the Cursebot. Anyways, let us move on to the Mana Guardian. The Mana Guardian unfortunately did not get very revolutionized with the addition of tattoos. There's no mana tattoo or anything like that, which is kind of the only stat you care about. There is, however, something cheeky you can do down here with the Healthy Minds, and that you can tattoo max life here on the travel nodes, and then those max life nodes get transformed into mana. So you can get a little bit of mana here. My Mana Guardian also tattooed +1 max fire res because we were sitting at 90, 90, 89 over cap instead of 90, 90, 90. So you can get +1 max fire res, just a little bit of a bonus here. One other new addition here was the Censure of Benevolence. We talked about this pre-league, and this thing really worked out super well. This belt is super OP and will probably be a permanent addition to the Mana Guardian for leagues to come. Being able to apply all of your flasks and the suffixes to your entire party is extremely useful and something that cannot be understated. One other thing that we might see here is the Hungry Loop. He actually decided to make a Hungry Loop with a bunch of things that will help him cast Souling. This helps him cast Souling super fast when the Aurabot just happens to not be in range. This just kind of helps with the mana cost, and since we're trying to save on sockets here, you can use a Hungry Loop, drop a little bit of mana, and still have a really nice feeling Soul Link with the Hungry Loop. Other than that, not a ton of changes with the Mana Guardian. It has the same exact pathing as we were planning, and tattoos didn't really do a whole ton for it, just a little bit of a bonus in the Healthy Mind wheel down here near Scion. Anyways, moving on to the Culler, and we do have some very interesting developments here because there is a rarity tattoo. Now, as you can see down here, we have opted for the Mickey Mouse pathing, and we will be trademarking this and suing anybody that copies it. If we see you using our Mickey Mouse technology, we will sue you. But yeah, we POB'd this pathing here, and it is actually extremely efficient with a Warrior's Tail as well as 2 Might of the Meeks to multiply the rarity to get even more rarity out of it. We are sitting at the tattoo cap actually, which is 50, and doing all this pathing for rarity down here is actually better than pathing to voices for rarity jewels. So you can hit the tattoo cap doing this Mickey Mouse looking ass pathing down here. And of course, we got a triple notable elegant hubris with supreme ostentation, luckily, so that we could do the tattoo memes down here. There is not as much suppression as we would like on this build, but since we were doing deli mirrors instead of 5 orbs because ghosts were broken, we felt pretty safe. The Culler really wasn't ever dying unless it was to some really crazy detonate dead or something like that. overall he was staying alive, and he was honestly one of the least concerned party members in terms of survivability. But yeah, the tattoo additions here to the Culler here made a substantial difference to our rarity, and for the first time ever, it is possible to hit 1,000 tooltip on rarity. This rarity is without Rampage and also without a rare helmet craft here. This rarity to rare and unique enemies does not appear on the tooltip here, so you're going to be well over 1,000 rare to have Rampage stacks as well as it being a rare or unique enemy. But yeah, there are big gains for the Culler here. Just the Mickey Mouse pathing here with all the rarity you're getting is honestly crazy. I think we gained something like 150 rarity from just tattoos, if not like 200%. With all the multiplication and shit that's going on down here. It's honestly really crazy. Last thing to talk about here was our Ghost Runner POB. Now, there are a lot of things that we learned about this POB and this character that we're going to try and share with you now. The first thing is that we initially thought that the ghost did not have an animation to go and possess you, but we now know that is not the case. You have to kind of AFK under a lot of mobs, and so this character is going to be less built for movement speed, and it's going to be more built to just never die. Now, of course, you do want to have a healthy amount of movement speed, like 300, maybe 400%, something in that range. Yeah, a few of the main things we learned was the Blood Notch Immutable Force with the ES Mastery is a big mistake. We were finding that if you have Blood Notch and Immutable Force with the ES Mastery, so you get stunned a bunch, we were actually finding ourselves perma-stunned by a bunch of mobs that were like shotgunning you with things like projectiles. We were getting into situations where our Ghostbuster could just no longer move at all. He just could not move at all. And so we eventually had to take off the Blood Notch Immutable Force so that he can kind of become stun immune. Taking off the Mastery as well as getting just the Immutable Force was enough to have it so he felt comfortable with stuns. Being elemental ailment immune is also pretty big, and while not having enough reservation efficiency to apply Purity of Elements, Storm Shroud is a super easy way to get it because you can get completely elemental ailment immune by just having a flask. This suffix here in particular, which is the chance to avoid being shocked, will apply to all the elemental ailments, and then that way he is elemental ailment immune. Most of the gear here is just fractured with an essence craft, and it is honestly very cheap to put together. The other main thing here is you can actually use one of these Giga Life Flasks instead of a Minion Recovery Life Flask because you actually don't really need haste in the build. The movement speed is not so important as the tankiness is, so I would go for a much more defensive Life Flask that can give you just tons of recovery. Additionally, Progenesis here is a luxury item and is not completely necessary, especially if you're not in a 6-man and you have extra portals to spare. It's fine dying every once in a while on the Ghost Runner, but Progenesis will really make this character immortal. There is one thing to mention, however. We do think that Defiance of Destiny is best in slot amulet on this build. We did not manage to get our hands on one. We were just kind of blasting it in the zone. However, if you are building this character, I would highly recommend putting on a Defiance of Destiny if you can afford it. This with Progenesis will make your character actually immortal and make it so you can stand there tanking any hits that are coming to you. Additionally, one other thing to mention here with tattoos is that you really should be tattooing Recoup on your it nodes if possible. Getting a ton of Recoup on this build is necessary, and tattoos is one of the easier places to get it if you are pathing through a bunch of int nodes. So wherever you can get Recoup, you should be putting it on the int nodes here. All right, now that all the builds are out of the way and we kind of went over all the changes that we applied to the builds as a result of tattoos, we can kind of talk about our Atlas strategy. So we had the original plan to go and do 5 orb elder maps with ghost and boxes. However, there was one big problem, and that the tormented spirits are currently bugged with delirium. If delirium is active on the map, their AI bugs out and they just freeze in place, and they unfortunately cannot possess you and they don't move around. They're just completely bricked. So if you want to have any amount of delirium on your map, one option for you is to use deli mirrors. And you can go around and infect the ghost before popping the mirror, and then once you're done ghosting the whole map, you can then pop the mirror, and then in conjunction with a new keystone, you can have permanent delirium on your map. It might not be the most optimal strategy post bug fix, but I don't believe it is fixed yet, and you still cannot do delirium and torment on the same map. When you do use a deli mirror like this, however, it does open you up to be able to use 8 modded maps. And the 8 modded maps have a huge multiplier to the strongbox mobs and the entire map more generally. And it is very tough to say whether or not the 5 deli orbs is going to outcompete starting with 8 mods on your map until we actually go in game and test it. They're probably pretty similar, but the speed at which you can run the 8 mod maps with deli mirror is actually sky high. Your maps are blazing fast at like 6, 7, 8 minutes or something like that, which is quite fast for 6 men. But if they ever fix the bug with Torment and Delirium, we will need to go back and test the efficacy of running 5 orbs with ghosts versus boxes with ghosts. It's just something to keep in mind, but this is the tree we selected. I will share our final tree in the description. Basically, it's Wandering Path, bunch of Expedition chance, bunch of Legion chance, has the Delirium Keystone. It is super cookie cutter stuff. As for the juicing mats themselves, we were running all winged Div, Reliquary, Torment, and Ambush. And our sextants were Elevated Enrage at 600% quant, plus 3 boxes, Deli Mirror, and then Hunted Traders. And then we would roll our maps to be 8 mods. You basically just chisel and corrupt them, run only the 8 mods. And if the map has Beyond on it, you put plus 4 ghosts on the map craft. And if it does not have Beyond, we were crafting Beyond with the map device. There is one other slight variation on the strategy where you can drop the Hunted Traders and use an elevated Beyond sextant instead. And in that scenario, you're going to get the consistent Beyond and the more Beyond spawns with the sextant. However, when the map roll happens to have Beyond on it, you're going to not be able to add the additional Hunted Traders plus 4 ghosts. So the peak juice is a little bit lower, but the overall baseline of loot might actually be a little bit higher. So those are kind of the 2 things that you can do. My apologies for the flashbang, but now that we know what our mapping strategy was, we can kind of analyze the data that we collected from our mapping sessions over the course of our week-long push. Now, I collected all of the relevant data that was exclusively Delirium Mirror 8 mod mapping. And I also combined all of the Mapwatch data and cut it off so that this is just one continuous data set for one strategy. I'm going to include a link to this in the description if you want to look through it yourself, but we ran a total of 272 cemeteries with full wing. Our total brothers gifts was at 160 and our total brothers stashes was at 179. We full bricked a total of 13 maps where somebody died early, whether that's the carry or the Aurabot, and we just could not complete the map. We had a total of 67 half bricks, which we measured by deaths plus duration of the map. It's kind of an arbitrary guideline. We just kind of had to try and pick a point of which multiple people died and the map was a little bit shorter. We had a total of 67 of those. And we had a total of 192 full or flawless completion. And try and set a gauge on like the effective maps we completed, and that is at 230.7. Some interesting stats is that we had 0.58 gifts per map, 0.65 stashes per map, and we had around a 0.7% brothers gifts per effective completion. Had an average map time of 8 minutes and 31 seconds. A total amount of time mapped is 2,316 minutes, which is a grand total of 38.6 hours of non-stop winged mapping, which means that we were receiving around 4 brothers gifts per hour over the course of our full winged sessions. The average div card value on brothers gifts was 3.47 per map, and if you include the stashes and unions, our average div card value per map was 4.1 divs. So right now with the current prices, if you want some consistency, you can still run cemetery. However, with apothecary being a whopping 55 divines here, your expected value return from the apothecary at this point is going to outcompete cemetery. This is pretty typical. There's usually a point at which apothecary starts outcompeting cemetery in div card value, but it typically takes like 4 or 5, maybe 6 days from the start of the league. There's one thing to say, however, is if you cannot afford long dry streaks, you should not be MFing this card. I would stick to cemetery. Even in a large 6-man party, you can go dozens, 10s, 30, 40, 50 maps without seeing an apothecary drop because the variance is just so high. So unless you can afford the losses, I would not try and farm apothecary. One other thing to mention here is we did try MFing Fortunate a little bit. I do think that this div card expected value is a little bit lower than Brothers Gift, and unfortunately there are no good maps that have supplementary cards on it. When you're MFing Brothers Gift, you also have Union, which carries your div card value. It can give you like 0.5 or 0.6 divines per map in Unions. There is just not currently a map that has a good supplemental card. There is, however, Fortunate on the Burial Chambers map. It is currently out of rotation and drop disabled, but next league, if you could hypothetically farm Fortunate as well as Doctor, it is going to outcompete every single map in the game for div card expected value and I do think that this is going to be the map to farm next league. Some other bits and pieces here. This was our total split for the league. Here it is split between all of the mappers and the traders here, and it further breaks down into the 3 different people we had trading. We pay them more or less based off of how much time they were contributing. Some of these people weren't full-time trading for us. And so as you can see here, Kurosaki in the middle gets a little bit less. This is a screenshot we took kind of like towards the end of our selling. We did get up to like around 2,100 divines. So our total takeaway was 15 mirrors and around 2,100 divines. If you take all of our combined Mapwatch data with all of the mapping we were doing divided by the total amount of net worth that our 9-man team had, we were making around 6 to maybe 7 divines per hour in the map for a highly coordinated 9-man team. This is, however, probably slightly inflated by the fact that we did drop 4 Mage Bloods while we were mapping. So I do expect that without those really crazy T0 unique drops, we're going to probably be sitting around 5 to 6 divines per hour, which is probably a pretty healthy amount for groups to be sitting at. And in relation to that, I do get a lot of questions like, is loot back? Is this POG? Is MFing back, boys? And I have 2 main thoughts when I get asked that question. And one of them is clearly, yeah, like a lot of loot is dropping on the ground and it is quite fun. We did have a lot of fun this league with all of the new ghosts, like the mechanics, like it's just super a good time. Like it's the old Path of Exile I know, right? We just have like the big ass loot explosion and we're just all having a good time. The main concern I have is that all of this hinges upon Torment or Ghost being kind of the crutch that this all lies upon. It really is a house of cards that the amount of loot that you're able to generate just completely hinges upon 1 or maybe 2 mechanics, and that is Torment and then strong boxes with the Enraged. And without those 2 things, like the only thing you have left really is Abyss. And so while, yeah, you can kind of make good money MFing, it is serviceable and it's not like a crazy amount of money. I just kind of wish that there were a few more mechanics that you can engage with to try and, you know, drop a little bit more ground loot. And mainly I'm just kind of talking about stuff like Breach. Like it is actually just sad how fucking dog shit that league mechanic is. And also Alva, like they really need to do something with these league mechanics in terms of ground loot because it's really, really just not worth your time. They really did our old girl Alva dirty. But yeah, I mean, you can totally MF in a 6-man. You can make serviceable money. It's not crazy 5-6 divs an hour for a hyper coordinated 5, 6, 7, 8-man team. It's all right. It's not amazing, but it's fun. But yeah, guys, I think that about wraps it up for me. Hopefully this sheds some light on kind of like our strategy, how it went. Hopefully it helps your groups. Maybe you learned something. I had fun. One last thing I actually want to touch on here is the league mechanic. It's not for me. It doesn't really scale in a group. I fucking hate clicking totems. I want to move my character. I just don't enjoy it, but maybe you do. That's about all I really have to say for it. Do have one last thing. I am also going to be putting together some clips and make a little montage of all the cool drops, all the cool moments we had while we were playing, so look out for that. Also, if you have any questions, you can always leave them down in the comments. I try to answer as many people as I can. Yeah, until next time, guys, I'm Snap, and thanks for watching.